Welcome, everybody, to Talk of the Now podcast. This is Gene once again with Cowboy Jason coming at you.
How y'all doing?
Or as I like to call him, Buford T. Jason. How you doing, Buford T?
Well, I'm doing right fine now, Gino. How you is? No.
Remind me the next time I see your mama.
Remind me when we get home, punch your mama right in the mouth.
For those of you that can't see because you're listening to audio, you need to go over to the YouTube channel. But for those of you that can't see, Jason is wearing a nice white cowboy hat, looking wonderful there. Nice white cowboy hat, and some shades, some little Ray-Bans.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, aviators.
Got my nice George Strait resistol on. Yes.
Man, you got me wanting to go get a cowboy hat. I've been wanting to buy one for a while, and I just hadn't got around to it. One day I'll get one. I mean, not that I'm a cowboy, born and raised in suburban Atlanta, but
well, you know,
I would like to have a cowboy hat one day.
Gene, you should have been a cowboy.
How do I sound, by the way?
Oh, you sound good.
The last few podcasts that I went back and listened to, I felt like my sound was not coming in super clear, so it made me wonder if my microphone was off.
I'm looking rather blue. I don't know if it looks blue on your screen, but
not too blue.
Okay.
No more than a George Strait song. Hey, am I blue?
That's right, or baby blue, either one, or out of the blue, clear sky, Gene. Yes.
Indeed. Blue skies are crying in the rain. I've always been torn between, well, not torn. I do like Willie Nelson's music. I think he's a pretty talented guy. But I'm not, he's sort of a, I got to be in the mood to listen to him type singer.
Yep. I agree.
So there, I said it.
There it is. It's been said.
There it is. That's said. You know what you're reminding me of? You're reminding me. I know you don't call it college. I know you don't follow college football very closely, other than the Georgia Bulldogs, Go Dogs.
Mm-hmm. Go Dogs.
But Deion Sanders is a big name in college football this year because he's taken over the Colorado Buffaloes, and a lot of times he'll wear his aviators and a hat, sometimes even a cowboy hat at interviews or things like that. It just kind of reminded me of Deion. And I saw that. So I thought that was pretty cool.
There we go.
What? No way. There's a day. So yeah. Now he's speaking English. It's a great episode so far. I gotta say,
we are on it tonight, folks. Yes.
In the words of Ted Knight, top notch, top notch. Man, what an outdated reference. I bet anyone under 30 doesn't even know who Ted Knight is.
Right. Man, you can make coffee in your...
If they're lucky, they know who Ted Knight is. I got to turn you up because I'm not hearing you very well. There we go. You still there, Jason? Because you are as frozen as a lake in December in Saskatchewan. Are you still there, Jason?
Oh, I'm here.
Oh, you were frozen for a second there.
Yeah, you went away.
I've been here the whole time.
Oh.
This is going to turn out like great audio. The best podcast we've had yet.
That's right.
Jason, you called this meeting. What do you want?
I don't know. Hey, Gene.
Oh, gosh.
Hey.
Hi. Hi, Jason. How you doing?
I'm doing all right, man.
How you doing? I found a cool YouTube channel to watch recently with my wife. And the guy's name is, I know I'm going to butcher it because it's Italiano. I don't always get the paisanos' names right, you know?
No.
Let's see. Let's see if I can find the paisano. Of course, I don't have the. I'm looking through my YouTube tabs that I have open. I'm trying to find him. I want to say his name's Pete, but maybe not. Hang on. If I had elevator music, I'd play it right now.
We're riveted.
Did you just refer to yourself as we? Because that was awesome.
Yep. I am a group sometimes.
Peter Santenello.
Okay.
It was Peter Santenello. And he, very intriguing videos.
Okay.
You know, I feel like 80% plus of the videos you see on YouTube are going to be something stupid. But he actually takes his, I guess, cell phone or camera or something and one man show, and he takes it out there and interviews people in different regions and places. The particular one that I'm watching right now is the Appalachia region.
Okay.
He's originally from Vermont, I guess, born and raised, and he's going into deep Appalachia from like the Kentucky, West Virginia side of things, and he's like going into the deep part, and he's finding characters and individuals, I guess, through networking, and they'll take them on rides to hollers, and he'll interview them about the region and how things are in it and everything.
Okay.
I'll send you a link on some of it sometime.
All right.
But it's really cool. And one particular one that I found that was really cool, he found a guy that he's not Amish, but he's sort of the Mennonite way of living. And he lives off the grid, except for a landline phone. And he lives on 50 acres in Kentucky. And basically, he just lives off his land. He eats whatever vegetable he grows. And he doesn't eat any. I mean, he doesn't like grow pigs. I mean, he has horses for travel and stuff because he uses a carriage. But otherwise, it's very intriguing. But he's a good interview. He does a good job of just going. And he does everything across the board for like just finding different places. He visits, really bad urban areas like downtown Detroit type places, and rides along with I think ex-gang members and that sort of thing. It's very cool.
Wow.
So, well, Jason, I think I have a good topic that you'll like tonight.
Oh, this isn't the topic that's riveting all the listeners? No.
Well, I mean, I guess I could talk about some other guy's YouTube podcast for an hour, but I don't think I will. But if y'all want to check it out, go check it out. I'll try to link it as well in
the description.
In the description.
Like and subscribe.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the topic here, Jason, audience of 1 or 2, however many people are currently listening,
Maybe
is one that I want to give a little intro. It's one that Jason will not have any trouble talking about whatsoever. I would almost venture to say that Jason is an amateur scholar on this subject matter.
Uh-oh.
And he's going to provide plenty of authority on this. I've pulled up a Wikipedia page about this current topic. The last 3 topics that we've done have been about 80s music. And once I learn to speak English, we'll get into it. No,
movies and music, yeah.
Yeah, we didn't. I'm sorry. Why did I say movies? Yeah. So before we get into this topic, by the way, I did enjoy that, and I thought that I had some great movies. You did too, by the way. BTW.
Don't acronym me.
I hate it when I see acronyms. I have no idea what they mean, or somebody texts me one, and I'm like, "What does this mean?" And they're like, "Be right there." I'm like, "Oh, gotcha." The movie
today's sponsor is Prevagen, by the way.
Well,
okay.
Super Beats. I think it might be fun. I was just thinking out loud here. The movies that we went through for the 80s. It might be fun to do a few more deep dives. I mean, we've done a few deep dives. I think our next deep dive on an 80s movie might be Back to the Future. I don't think we've done one on that.
Right.
And then maybe we did a deep dive on Back to the Future. We done one on Star Wars. which is two of them are 80s movies. We did a deep dive on the Indiana Jones movies. So I think that we could probably do a deep dive on a few other movies from the 80s that we went through and didn't get a lot of chance to talk about. Jason, you've suddenly turned into a Silicon Valley programmer who's trying to write code. He went from Buford Justice to Bill Gates of 1984.
You like my costumes, eh?
I do. It's very eclectic.
These are blue filter glasses. Actually, they're very helpful.
I can't make you big. Oh, there you are.
Not many people can.
So without further ado, let me get into this topic because people that see the description will be pissed that we did not get to the topic.
Until like 40 minutes into the podcast.
Yeah.
We're the Titanic. 45 minutes, I haven't even hit the iceberg. Yeah,
okay, so this movie, this topic is about something that, like I said, Jason doesn't need any preparation. He's probably going to be an authority on it, even though I've already put up the Wikipedia to read about it some and talk about it some. I wanted to talk about related to the 80s because I've had it on the list of something to check out at some point. Okay. The band INXS.
I don't know anything about them.
No, just all right. Have a good night, everybody. Be sure to tip your waitress at the door.
And bring me to bitter tears, Gene. Bitter tears.
Bitter tears. Well, unfortunately, I think that the band INXS is of course, tragic because of the death of the lead singer, Michael Hutchins. Which was truly tragic. And I don't really want to get into the tragic part of the band. I'd like to just maybe talk about the band, its history, and what we like about the band, and as well as him, and not really get into the sadness of it. You know what I mean? Like just sometimes I think it's good just to celebrate the things that we liked about a band and their influence and what was good.
That's why we know them. That's why we know them is because of how they affected us, right? So yeah,
right. I mean, you look at Elvis, for instance. We don't want to think about the bad, sad, bitter end of Elvis Presley. We celebrate all the good stuff that we liked and that brought a nation together.
Right.
And sure, Elvis could be a deep dive one day, but with INXS though, I don't know. What are your initial thoughts about INXS? Go ahead. You have the floor.
Well, I'll be honest with you. They're a band that I liked in the 80s, just because they were what was on. Didn't really like get into them in the 80s because I didn't really get into a band really, back then. It was more I was just into music being on and playing. And I think, regrettably, I never saw them live. Had a chance to see them in 96, actually, at the old Lakewood Amphitheater Fairgrounds buildings. They played like a 99X show or something exclusive thing there in one of the big fairground buildings. And didn't. And of course he, died the next year. But I would say, they stood out to me. They're one of those bands that has a multitude of albums, but one album always stands out, and that's Kick. Kick's always one that stands out with them because it had so many radio hits off of it. Sure. But I mean, it had albums before that. They got started on the college scene. Actually, the record companies didn't want to even release them because they didn't know what to do with them because of their sound. So their manager just decided the radio stations on the college campuses back in the day and do it himself. Peter Murphy, he took them nationwide in the U.S. On his own. So had it not been for the college music scene of the 80s, we might not even know who INXS is. There's a good documentary.
Peter Murphy, a singer, by the way?
No.
Okay, I feel like I know that name.
He's their manager. But anyway, he took him worldwide when the record company said we're not going to. He actually did it kind of illegally. to start with. He took the records themselves and took them to the radio stations and released them. When back in the day, you're supposed to do that through a record company. And then, of course, they got really big, and the record company was really all about it then. But the two-part documentary mini or docudrama, Never Tear Us Apart, on Australian television. I was actually able to watch it on one of the movie channels back in the day, and it was really well done. But yeah, I would say that they're the progressive 80s sound to an extent. Now, they're not progressive like Yes, or obviously the kings of all progressive rock, Rush, but they're a bit of a European progressive without being European, So they came out of a country that, gave us Little River Band, the Bee Gees, bands like that. And they brought their own kind of unique sound through Hutchinson's lyrics and what's his name? One of the Ferris brothers. Can't remember. Somebody's yelling at me now.
John or Tim? I'm looking at the Wikipedia here.
No, it was
John and Tim are the only ones listed as band members. You had Gary Beers.
Gary Beers, the bass player. What's his name? There's three brothers.
Andrew
Andy Ferris. Yeah, Andy's the one that wrote most of the music.
So which instrument did he play? The keyboards. Okay.
Keyboard, yeah. And so, you get, I think there are a lot of bands from the 80s that kind of get lumped into one genre and get lumped into a big genre.
Sure.
INXS to me kind of stands out in the way that Def Leppard stands out of their genre to me. Because a lot of people try to lump Def Leppard into hair metal, but it's not really when you listen to it. They have hair metal-esque things going on, but they're not. But then INXS is kind of like, they're that progressive sound. It could almost be a mix between like XTC, The Cure, and maybe Psychedelic Fur sound, but they're not quite that. They still have their own thing.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say to that point that they're not like this band, but they could be a brother to this band. As close as a band has ever came to U2, I think they're almost kind of like a companion, like brother type band to U2, of that sound they were in during the late 80s.
Yeah, because it's I don't know how to classify it, because I would never call U2 really progressive rock, but they're kind of I don't know. You're a bigger U2 fan.
Yeah, well, their origins are punk. U2,
right? Yeah,
they're sort of post-punk. That was their origins, and rock just kind of
right, but without the punk sound. Yeah.
Well, their early stuff has like really heavy influence of punk in it. That's why I say post-punk kind of.
And to me, I'm glad that INXS went with a new name when they did, because they were the Ferris brothers.
Oh, were they really?
Yeah, and then
so like a Ferris wheel.
One of their Ferris, FAR or whatever it was, ISS, and then they also, their first manager kind of came up with that name INXS, as in like you do something in excess,
right?
And because they were looking at bands like XTC, so ecstasy, doing it phonetically with letters like that. Because XTC is another great band from back then, British band. But
interesting.
I could see a lot of influences from XTC to me on INXS, even more than U2. Now later U2, but it was kind of like a blend of that, even though those are both European type bands, but whereas INXS was Australian. So,
well, if you recall, Kick came out, or I think the same year as Joshua Tree.
True.
And they're very different, but they also have a lot of I don't know if the word is epic or kind of I don't know, just sort of unique qualities about them.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
Just very outstanding, crazy, wild albums.
Yeah, you think about it, like obviously Joshua Tree is U2's. I don't know if it's technically their most successful album, but it's their most memorable album. As far as sales go, I don't
But yeah, a
know.
lot of people's opinion, they're best for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with them. I like, Joshua Tree is one of the original pressing U2 albums that I own. Um, but I found a copy of Kick original pressing at a record store in their $5 section.
Oh wow.
And the point being, like, it was in pristine condition, but it's around, like, because people wore that record out. And also tapes were coming out at that time. Tapes were bigger, and CDs, actually. CDs were coming out at that time too.
Yeah.
So
I mentioned sorry.
He just had a bunch of different formats, all
Well,
kind of.
you reminded me I was going to mention that my first impression of, well, I was around 11 when in 87 when so I think that around that age I started noticing more things with music and everything. And I remember liking that album a lot. And if I'm not mistaken, I actually asked for that cassette tape and got it in either my Easter basket, which my parents gave us Easter bunny baskets as kids, or a Christmas, present. Like
Yeah.
it was a under the tree Christmas present, and I thought that was the coolest thing, getting the INXS cassette. Another one that came to mind was I originally got Big Bang Boom, the Hall & Oates cassette, and I think my Easter bunny basket one year. And so that comes to my mind. I just remember that Kick album, and thinking that was so cool. Excuse me. The looking at the Wikipedia album, the page, it says that um, obviously they were an Australian band, which you mentioned, which is funny because Australia is funny in itself. Australian is sort of a pseudo Western yet not Western because of its culture and people. It's sort of a Western but not really Western, and it's Eastern but not really Eastern country altogether because of its history.
Yeah.
And they get these crazy influences from the Aboriginal culture and the Kiwi culture, and I imagine a lot of American culture from television and stuff, and rock, from America. They get all the media influence over the last 50 years, I imagine, from America and England, because they're speaking English, and they're not that I'm any authority on
And
Australian
they're
culture.
obviously a British colony for the longest time, so they're very British, and they're
Right.
a lot of their stuff too.
But it's so far away in the East.
Right, but affectionately called British rednecks for that reason.
Are they? I haven't heard that
Yeah,
term.
they've called themselves that. A lot of people do in Australia. I heard an
I have
Australian.
seen Crocodile Dundee, so yeah, it makes sense.
I heard an Australian artist, a country artist, Cherie Austin. She came and played at our college one time. She said she's just a British redneck. But but you get people like we've said, the Bee Gees, pretty big band from Australia.
AC/DC, right?
Yeah, to some degree,
I mean,
Scottish and Australian.
I think some of the members moved to Australia at some point.
And then Olivia Newton-John, Little River Band. Rick Springfield technically was born in Australia.
Yeah.
So there's a lot from Australia.
More recently, Keith Urban.
Yeah, Wolf Mother.
Mm.
A lot of stuff comes out of Australia. Australia is a great culture for music. They really do. But their whole goal was to make it bigger and outside of Australia, obviously.
Right.
But
okay.
They had their show. What was it? Countdown.
Mm-hmm.
So I must be frozen again. Hey, oh, there we go.
You did freeze.
I must be frozen because you disappeared. That documentary, that docudrama series is probably the best for their whole history.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
They have a. I don't know if you watched that with me.
I need to watch it actually.
Back at the day. Well, good luck finding it. I've been able to find it. You might actually have to figure out a way to buy a hard copy that is somehow.
I could probably find a decent one on YouTube or something.
But everything from their first radio song that got on the radio in Australia, which was their song "Simple Simon," which is a funny song altogether.
Oh,
But
I'm
yeah.
sorry. I was going to say, let me get back. There were, like you said, founded by the Ferris brothers in
Hmm.
1977. I didn't know they got started that early,
Hmm.
which coincidentally is about the time U2 got started
Yeah.
in Ireland. So a lot of parallels there. The founding members, like you said, were is it Gary Beers?
Gary Beers.
Okay, I wasn't sure if that was pronounced Jerry or Gary. Okay. Um,
Yeah.
the main composer and, like you said, keyboardist Andrew Ferris and drummer John Ferris, guitarist Tim Ferris. They're kind of like Van Halen without the name of the band, right?
Right.
Um, and the lead singer and main lyricist, of course, Michael Hutchence, and guitarist and saxophonist uh, Kirk Pingley. So for
Yep.
20, okay, um, obviously 20 years they were funded by Hutchence, and the kind of name you want to say Hutchinson, but it's Hutchins. Um,
Hutchins. It's not even Hutchins. It's Hutchins.
Hutchins,
Yeah.
whose magnetic stage presence made him the focal point of the band. If
Hate
you don't,
Wikipedia.
and if you know nothing about you INXS, that's obvious. Um, Initially known for their new wave pop style, the band later developed a harder pub rock style. I never heard the term pub rock, that included funk and dance elements, which is true. And their first debut album was, I'm sorry, their first number one hit in Australia was Original Sin. Um, and of course, goes through some of their albums, which we'll get into in a minute. Of course, but Michael Hutchence, if we talk about him for a minute, that guy, I would say, I don't believe in things like reincarnation or anything like that, but has there been a closer Jim Morrison in the music business than Michael Hutchence in a lot of ways? Just kind of his, I mean, I know he wasn't probably as crazy as Jim, or out there, I don't know.
Mm,
but,
um.
but just like the magnetic personality that just, sort of,
Stage presence. Yeah.
yeah, stage presence of
And it
very,
looked
to
like
me,
he looked like him too, which was kind of makes that comparison a lot easier.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and the guy that got to play him in the mockumentary, wow, pretty good job.
You know who would have been a really good actor, of course, to play him at a younger age would have been Val Kilmer, I think, of course.
Yeah, because he played Jim Morrison of the
Yeah.
Doors. Yeah,
Well, he would just have a great talent for taking on his personality, I think.
right. But they, yeah, and I don't know, most people know this that Michael Hutchence lost his sense of smell. Um, he was actually
Mm.
he was walking around in Germany with the model Helena Christensen that he was dating, and
Wow.
some other people, and a cab driver almost ran him over or something like while they're walking, and Michael just kind of like beats on the hood and says, man, what are you doing? The guy gets out and punches Michael so hard he hits the ground, and the brain injury caused him to lose his sense of smell.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so which means he couldn't taste
That's
very
crazy.
well either. So there's like a lot of little things to him. Like he was always going off the deep end, especially after that brain injury when they recorded in, where was it? Was it Mallorca? Somewhere like that.
Hmm.
They couldn't get through recording sessions with him. And he was just,
Was this a post Kick album?
yeah.
Okay.
Um they yeah, they just couldn't, or was it Capri? One of those islands. Anyway, they recorded there, and yeah, he couldn't get through sessions. He was just belligerent, and
Wow.
yeah, he that brain injury had a lot to do with his behavior. But he went and left the band for a little while and formed a band called Max Q,
Hmm.
and then eventually came back to INXS.
Mm-hmm.
But Andy Ferris is like, man, I wish you would have saved some of those lyrics for the Max from Max Q for their INXS albums. Um, and of course, they were in the midst of starting an Australian tour when he died. Um,
Mm.
they rehearsing there, and yeah.
He was born 1960, January 22nd, 1960, in Crow's Nest, New South Wales, Australia.
In the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, I was about to say that must be the middle of nowhere because I've heard of New South Wales, but not Crow's Nest of any. He died in New South Wales as well, by the way, in Double Bay at the age of 37 in 1997. Crow's Nest, Australia. I'm looking this up now because I'm kind of curious where it is in Australia. Okay, north of Sydney. So I
Yeah,
guess
he
that's the
died.
suburbs.
Yeah, he died at a hotel in Sydney. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, he was pronounced dead at the hospital, but he died in Sydney.
Mm-hmm.
Came up
Well,
came up later on as in the Paradise Papers. In case you ever want to look up, some of the stuff that he may or may not have been involved with.
mm-hmm.
Paradise Papers are something to look up. Actually, it's kind of a side story. It's kind of interesting.
So you think that his I don't know if he had any, did he have trouble with like drugs, alcohol, depression, or anything like that before the accident? I mean the incident.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean he was wild. He was just a wild one. He's your typical lead singer.
Mm-hmm. So he was the sex, drugs, rock and roll stereotype person that kind of
Emphasis,
gave into all the indulgences.
Probably in bold, italicized, capitalized sex of those three.
Mm-hmm.
He was famous for that. I mean, he broke Kylie Minogue's heart. Back in the day, because he dated Kylie Minogue. He was
Really
pretty good. I actually went and watched that documentary done on him with him and Kylie. It was basically a lot of it was him and Kylie.
Hmm.
I watched it. It came out in the theater a few years ago, and I went and watched it. And a lot of it's the intimate footage stuff that like he took, because he took a camera around a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and so he was filming all the little stuff. It was really good. No visuals needed really, but so there's a lot of aspects to that, to the band.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Kylie, I think in a concert, of course, she went. I mean, she's crazy, silly pop. She went and did a version of "Never Tear Us Apart" in concert one time in tribute to him. But and I danced with my wife at our wedding. Our first dance was "Never Tear Us Apart."
Oh yes, I remember. Yeah.
I chose that one, and to honor Michael, and to because it's one of those good songs.
Well, one of the most heartbreaking things about his legacy to me is that he did leave a child. I mean, not unfortunately, but he left a child that was unfortunately grew up without a dad, pretty much.
Yeah. There's a whole incident between him and Bob Geldof. Bob Geldof of what's the name of the band? I can't remember, but he also organized the Live Aid. He was the organizer for Live Aid. But
oh yes,
yeah.
I don't like Mondays guy.
Yeah. Boomtown Rats. That's it.
Yeah. Boomtown Rats. Okay, yeah, it's interesting. The Bob Geldof character, because I've heard in interviews where Bono felt like Hutchison was a brother to him.
Hutchins, yeah.
Hutchins, excuse me. I said it. And he wrote I mean, I don't know if you remember.
Stuck in a moment.
Yeah, that was written for Mr. Michael Hutchins, and which is kind of a sad song to listen to, but it's pretty touching stuff. The album, look, I want to go through the albums with you, which is interesting to me because they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 total albums, 10 of which Hutchins sang on. And it's interesting to look at this list because INXS 1980, Underneath the Colors 1981. Is it Sabo? I don't know how you pronounce that.
It's Shabu Shaba.
Shabu Shaba, that's what I said. 1982. And The Swing, 1984. I'm assuming that's not about the dance, the kind of dance you do, swing. Listen Like Thieves, 1985. And then Kick, 87. X, way before Twitter, 1990. Welcome to the whatever you are, wherever you are, 1982. I'm 1992. What decade am I in? Full Moon, Dirty Hearts, 1993. Elegantly Wasted, 1987. Switch,
Which is the
2005.
last one, 1997. But yeah, that's the last.
Right.
Elegantly Wasted was the last one.
And their post ones were Switch in 05 and Original Sin in 2010. Um, the interesting thing that I think about that list is I don't think they showed up on most people's maps until around 87. Yet they had 5 albums that came out before
With some hits on them.
Kick.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I love a lot of their songs.
Their first hit here was What You Need, actually.
Yeah, great song.
Off
great
of
album.
Like
Great video.
Yeah.
Yeah, Listen Like. Oh, that was off Listen Like Thieves. Okay.
Yeah, and Listen Like Thieves itself was a good song.
Don't Change was an earlier album, no?
Shaboo Shabba. Yep.
Oh, yeah. Which, by the way, we talked about Steve Craig on this show before of 99X in Atlanta radio station. You can find it online, by the way, if you want to check it out. It's a fun little radio station. He does a daily show for lunch called the Retro Pleasure, and basically he goes through
Retroplex. Yeah.
No, he's changed it back to its original title, the Retro Pleasure, and that's what he said it used to be called when he first started it, and they go through 80s new wave pop, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And he does a lot of great kind of deep cuts that a lot of people probably haven't heard before. And anyway, he was saying that that album was his favorite, Shaboo Shabba.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he said that was his favorite album of INXS, which
it had Don't Change and One Thing on it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good song too.
So do you have a favorite album for INXS, Jason?
Well, my favorite song is Don't Change, actually.
Okay.
So I guess Shaboo Shabba, but I mean, obviously Kick is probably, it's got the most number of memorable songs on it. I actually liked Elegantly Wasted, that last hit they had.
I need to listen to that.
Actually played on the song Elegantly Wasted. It played on 99X back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking, man, that's a great song. Like INXS is coming back. They're adapting. It still fits. They're still their own sound, but they still kind of fit in the alternative kind of range. Because like a lot of bands from then, some of the new wavy progressive 80s bands kind of got hit just about as bad as heavy as hair bands did with the influx of grunge.
Right. Yeah.
But in a different way. Like they could kind of adapt, but not really. And then you sort of didn't want them to adapt because then they don't sound like themselves.
Yeah.
But it was hard to survive. And, stations like 99X would always play, some of the new wave stuff too. So it wasn't straight up just the grunge rock.
Right.
It was some of that stuff, or the silly pop. It was the, that. But
it
anyway, yeah.
It wasn't all Stone Temple Pilots. They would still play an REO, REM song or whatever from the 80s.
Right. And they do that, or they play The Cure, or they play, something. So you had certain markets, bigger markets that had stations like that could play them. But I think all around, I think, Don't Change is my favorite song from
Don't
them.
Change would be your favorite song. Okay, that's up there for me. Yeah, for sure. I think that oh man. I was just thinking, let me pull up Kick. I think one of their songs there might be my favorite. Probably, I mean, I know this is an easy choice, but Need You Tonight might be my favorite. It's just such a fun song.
Yeah,
and then
song, just because
you always got to bleed into Meditate.
Right, because it makes sense. The same way that what is it? The two Journey songs, Anytime and
oh yeah.
And
oh yeah.
They have to be together even though they're not. They're separate songs. Or the same way that Falling In and Out of Love with You always blends into Amy from Pure Period League, but they're two separate songs. So
Tainted Love and what do you call it?
Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, there's not a wrong answer. I mean, they made a lot of great music. You know, there was some stuff that was played a lot. A lot of stuff off of Kick was played a lot.
Right.
But because I mean, you know, God, what's their most famous song? I'm totally blanking tonight, Gene.
Who's this?
Oh, INXS.
Oh, of INXS, they're I would say What You Need might be their most famous. I don't know.
No, it's off of Kick.
That was off Kick.
No, what you need is off of Listen Like These.
I'm sorry, I meant Need You Tonight. I'm sorry.
No,
I think that, but Devil Inside could be New Sensation.
Devil Inside, New Sensation. That's their
New
most famous
Sensation. To me, New Sensation and Need You Tonight is kind of a tie. I can't really say that one I like one over the other. They're both up there for me.
But New Sensation to me is the riding my bike to the pool in the summertime song. You know,
Uh-huh.
it's like that one to me is like completely summer song.
The videos are something else too. That album. Those such great videos from that album.
Yeah. I think a lot of that sound off of Kick comes from they're trying to influence college stuff at that time.
Mm.
That's what that album. If you listen to that album and then you think about college in the '80s, not that either of us really remember college in the '80s, but you watch like shows or movies and you look at the culture of college from back then. You had your REM, all that college music coming out.
Mm-hmm.
You can tell they made that one for college, and that's I think why it like resonates with everybody.
Yeah. Never Tear Us Apart. That's still a great one to listen to.
I mean, it is obviously. I chose it for my first dance at my wedding.
I mean,
so
if you're driving around and you've got nothing else to listen to, and you're just like, Never Tear Us Apart. I mean, I don't think you ever refused to listen to that one.
Right, I agree, and it's the melding of the the violins in there with it. I mean, just the whole strings. It's just. I mean, Andy Ferris was just brilliant on musicianship.
Here's my one beef on that album, and it's the same beef that I have for Bruce Springsteen's song, "I'm on Fire."
Mm-hmm.
Guns in the Sky. Love that song, but it's just too short. Like, I just want the song to be 4 minutes, and it just ends. You're like, I just wish it would keep going. So
I just ran out of room.
Yeah. Just I mean, I listen to that song, and I'm just like, oh man, I wanted to keep going, but it's ended.
Yeah, I mean,
I wish they had a longer version of it, extended version of it song.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if there's some kind. I do have the 30th anniversary of Kick on vinyl. I have that pressing, and I think it's got some extras on there. I haven't opened it, so I don't know. Yeah, I bought a new pressing, a 30th anniversary, and then I've got the original pressing. So.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah, and then I've got I think 3 copies of Shabu Shaba. I've got a couple Listen Like These, one of the Swing. I don't have any. The earlier albums are harder to find on vinyl at all.
Right.
Like the first 2. It's like
the
same way that you can't find Rush, that one really in a record store.
Well, I can tell you right now, if you are a INXS fan, there are all types of editions, expansions, Blu-rays, double disc versions of Kick that you could find out there. And breaking news, there is a longer version of Guns in the Sky called the Kick Ass Mix by Hutchins, which apparently is 6 minutes long. So
there you go, Gene.
I guess I got to check that one out.
You got to check that one out. But yeah, all in all, just to me, it's just hard to beat their sound. I mean, they had their own sound. Yes, it is distinctly 80s for the most part. But the only reason it's 80s is because it came out in the 80s and we associate it with that time frame. It's not. I don't think it's 80s because it sounds too much like anything else. I really don't think it does.
Well, like you and I, Jason, they were born in the 70s and they evolved into the 80s.
As a band, yeah.
Yeah, as a band.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's just, I think it's like you said, INXS comes on the radio, you turn it up. I mean, even if it's a song you heard 4 million times back in the day, like What You Need actually got played a lot. And, I think.
You know what I think of their music a lot of ways? Instrumentally, things like guitars, drum solos, guitar, to me they're minimalist a lot of ways.
In some ways, yeah.
Like
I
the
mean,
way
it's
that, like, you don't hear a lot of heavy guitar solos or a lot of
no, they're
overly,
definitely. I would say they're minimalist guitar, definitely.
hmm
Um,
which is
and
fine. It's just it's cool. It's
well,
fine.
honestly, in the same way that U2 is,
No, for sure.
because
Yeah.
nothing the
Good
Edge
point.
really does is extremely difficult on guitar,
Hmm
but it works for the sound. It doesn't have to be difficult. That's the point. Like, just you can still have a good sound and not be a complex guitar, solo. It doesn't have.
hmm So I
Um,
think it's safe to say U2 and NXS are like bands from another mother type thing.
True. One's Irish, one's Australian.
They seem to have a lot of coincidences that are odd, even going
Yeah,
back to their beginnings and stuff.
yeah. To an extent, like, I mean, there's some later songs like um, "Beautiful Girl." That song
Hmm
could have easily been recorded by U2. I mean, he
Yeah.
almost sounds Bono like on that one. That's the one
hmm
that I was like, oh man, listen to that new U2 INXS song, back in the day.
Right.
A later song from them, but great song.
They sort of have to me, I would say NXS over U2. To me, they have sort of a sound that you would expect to hear in an opera house almost. Very,
Yeah,
you know,
I know
um,
what you mean. I know what you mean. It's hard to. It's melodic. It's very layered, which is what Andy Ferris kind of was going for anyway when he was.
Suicide Blonde comes to mind when I think of that.
Yeah, it's very production. Like, yeah,
Hmm
Suicide Blonde was written obviously about Kylie Minogue, um, but
Hmm.
it was. They dealt a lot in reverb and things like that give it that kind of concert hall sound. And I think Andy did that on purpose. Um, they got accused on their live album from Wembley Stadium that they
Hmm.
did, Live Baby, Live Baby Live, I think it was.
hmm
Um, that they like added stuff in or something. And they didn't. They just mixed their music. But yeah, there's a lot of similarities, but there's some definite differences,
Oh, for
between
sure,
those two.
for sure.
You don't really have the angsty side as much as you two did. There's no Sunday Bloody Sunday on the INXS side, really.
Hmm
Um, I don't know. There's and it's hard really to describe them because they just are INXS. That's their sound,
Right, right.
and I
No,
guess
yeah,
that's
for
what makes
sure.
them great, and that's what makes them.
You know, to parallel them with the Doors, I kind of sense the frustration the band had after Michael Hutchins died. Same way as the Doors, they just, they never were anything again after that. None of the other
No,
band members really created another band or moved on to other things. Really, you know what I mean?
yeah, NXS tried with that the TV show where they
Right.
looked for that singer. Um, and it was a good idea. Not that the guy was a bad singer. It just are you going to get away with singing Michael Hutchins every night? Because when people come to see NXS, that's what they want to hear.
Right. No, no.
Um,
Yeah.
it's the same way I saw Stone Temple Pilots years ago with their new singer, who sounded exactly like Island. So it actually turned out really well. Now he looked like what's his name? He looked like the lead. He looked like the lead singer of Alice in Chains. He looked like Lane Staley, but he sounded like Scott Weiland. So they worked
Oh
out.
wow.
But sometimes it works out.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when you have an iconic sound, it's usually because you have an iconic singer too. And when that
Yeah.
singer
You're not going to replace
leaves,
Bono.
you can't. Like, yeah, whenever that happens way down the road or whatever,
Hmm
if the other band members are alive, they're not going to kick now. Or you could be like the Rolling Stones and say, well, we're just going to last guy, dies, shut the door before you keel over. I'm like,
Well,
you
I
know,
think that somebody like Queen sort of did it right in some ways because all they did was they just sort of brought in somebody as a guest singer, kind of like Paul Rogers for a long time.
Right.
It's like they knew they weren't going to just find another Freddie Mercury.
No, you
They
never
just
find another Freddie Mercury.
so they
Otherwise,
just
this
brought
guy.
in another great singer that everybody's real familiar with, and he just sort of kind of guest sang with them for a long time.
Right. Yeah.
I thought of somebody that would have been a great singer for them if they. So INXS, if you're listening, I think that Ronald Orzabal of Tears for Fears would be a decent singer for their songs.
Well, I could see it's a very similar sounding voice.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
When
Yeah,
I was
I never
listening,
thought about that.
I was
Huh.
listening to a Tears for Fears song the other day or today. What's the song? Oh gosh, Sowing the Seeds of Love, and I was like, wow, his tonal sound
Yeah.
is a lot like Michael Hutchins.
I never really thought about that, but it's like his delivery too, the way he delivers that
I think he
tone.
could pull off some of their music if they ever wanted to
Yeah.
hire him out.
I mean, if he still,
They still
if
tour.
if he wants to do it,
Well, yeah.
um,
He's still touring right now. As a matter of fact, I think they're on a tour right now. But
for the same reason that when what's his name of Boston died,
hmm
lead singer, I can't remember his name,
yeah, I know who you're
Tom
talking about.
Schultz. Yeah.
A few years ago.
They got Michael Sweet from Stryper to tour with him
Interesting.
because he can hit those freaking notes.
That's not easy to do.
And he can still hit them. I saw him in a small club here outside of Atlanta in Buford. I saw Michael Sweet. And man, Michael can hit those notes. The Stryper notes that we all remember from, To Hell with the Devil and all those songs like that. And then he sang some of the Boston songs, and it was like,
wow.
So singers that can still keep it at that level are very rare. It makes you wonder, like, if Hutchins had lived, would they still be touring?
Mm.
I think so because they're that iconic a band.
Yeah, if I guess it would all depend on what his life would have turned out. Would he have
Yeah.
just kind of decided that he was burnout and wanted to? I guess to me his personality. If he had grown old, might have been the kind of guy. I'm just going to buy an island in the Caribbean and live there or in New Zealand and just live on an island for the rest of my life and paint or something.
You never know.
I don't know. I don't pretend to know what he was like off stage.
I mean, I've heard, and whatever he was involved in that dealt with the Paradise Papers. I know it's a whole nother rabbit hole. But it was enough something for his brother to say what he said at his funeral, which was weird. His brother said, "And don't worry, I will keep what you are doing secret," or something. He said that at his funeral. Everybody went, "What is that?" It was like some strange statement. Like, and then it turns out later on he turns up in the Paradise Papers, which are like a lot of like people involved. You have to look it up. And I'm going, okay, is that what he was talking about? Because even that doesn't seem as secretive enough. Anyway, you just wonder.
Yeah.
You just wonder sometimes,
But either way,
to say like, would he have still been touring? He may have had other things he was doing.
Yeah.
That would have taken place. It's the same thing. Questions we ask about anybody that dies.
Right.
And this is not me saying, that guy right there hanging up behind me, Ayrton Senna. What would he done? What would any of them done?
Sure.
I mean, some of them aren't like the Rolling Stones where they're just living fossils and can just keep going somehow. 60 plus years. Like, good Lord, guys.
Well, some singers, I guess, they're I mean, they're
doing.
to this day, Mick Jagger's doing what nobody's done before in his genre of music. So,
I don't even understand.
Outside of maybe some of the older blues singers that maybe have lived into their 80s.
Right, but to be able to still tour like they do and perform, like, really.
Right.
And of course now they're not, obviously not the complete band anymore.
Paul McCartney still does it,
Yeah, so. I mean, well, Paul's always been Paul. Paul did his own side stuff and actually was successful though.
Oh yeah.
And that's kind of the way I see it. Like with some of these bands, would somebody broken off? It's hard to be successful on your own, outside of a band. And
no, I agree.
When the Rolling Stone wanted to finally put INXS on their cover, they only wanted to put Michael Hutchins. And Michael refused because he said, "No, we're a band, and you're going to put us all on that cover." That's how he was with his band. Now he was contentious to some degree, but he was loyal to his friends because they were all school friends.
Well, if you're in a band, in my opinion, you have to look at it like you're a family and you're brothers, and you're going to sit in the room and you're probably going to push each other every once in a while. You're probably going to mentally, physically, metaphorically, you're going to probably push each other around a little bit and get in fights. And at the end of the day, you're probably going to hug it out. You hope, and then all that kind of stuff. I think we both appreciate, and a lot of people appreciate INXS as a band, and I think that that's why we did this episode, so that people can just think about it and, hey, go listen to some INXS albums.
Yeah, one of my favorite bands from back then on.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, would they be in your top 5, either top 5 or 10 of all but time bands?
At least the top 10, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, really, honestly, they would be. And I judge that on one criteria. How much do I enjoy listening to them? Simplest criteria in the world.
Yeah.
You go for musicality. They're probably, we said there are a lot more complicated bands out there musically. I mean, one of my top bands of all time, Rush, is one of the most complicated bands musically of all time. So I think when it comes down to it, what do you like to listen to? And
sure.
What will you let play on a radio station even when you meant to turn it? Or a satellite radio, and they got like way too many channels like I do. I'll sit there and listen to music until something grates my nerves. And INXS doesn't do that. Never has. Even their overplayed stuff, I'll still listen to.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna turn "Need You Tonight" because I've heard it 4 million times. That's kind of how I judge a band, and I have my preferences, but I also, it's like movies. I just want to be entertained, and music, me and you both, I think, is even more dear to our hearts than movies are. And music defines a time in your life. Like I said, I'm riding my bike to the pool, the neighborhood pool, like going through the woods to go to the Milam Park pool in Clarkston, Georgia.
Yeah.
Listening to INXS on my Walkman. I mean, it makes sense. You can almost smell that day. Like that's what music does. And I think INXS does a good job of kind of encapsulating a time period and still being able to transport us back to that time period when we listen to it. Whatever that time period may be.
That's deep, Jason. That's deep.
I know. Sorry, I meant to put a deep thought disclaimer on.
That's deep.
But yeah, that's how I feel about INXS. So yes, I would say they're in my top 10 of all time.
Okay.
Now,
yeah.
Do I feel another list show coming on? Do I feel another list show coming
maybe
on?
so. Maybe we'll do something like that. We could do top 20 bands and top 20 albums. There you go.
Whew, yeah,
top 20 bands / musicians because.
Well, yeah, top 20 musical acts.
Sure.
Yeah, top 20 musical acts. And then I would say, in conjunction on that same list, put the top album from that one by each one. That way you're not doing two separate ones, because when it comes down to it, I think your top albums and your top artists should kind of be the same.
Yeah, that could be true. I don't know. Well, not necessarily for me though. One of my top albums is not one of my top bands. I can think of one right offhand. Yeah.
Are you gonna reveal these truths to us, Gene?
Well, I'll mention this before we leave because we're about to close it out. There's a band called Jars of Clay. Jason knows them. Christian band.
Used to
contemporary
like them.
Christian, contemporary Christian band. I loved them back in the 90s. First 2 albums are great. And their album, Much Afraid, is probably, I don't know if it's in my top 20, but it's probably top 25 albums. And the band itself, I could take her. I mean, they're fine, whatever. But just those 2 albums, though, probably in my top 25 albums, but they're not one of my top 20 bands at all.
They fell into the woke category for me, so I won't listen to them anymore. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll listen to those 2 albums over and over because I just think they're great. Same thing can be said for DC Talk. Jesus Freak, I love that album, but them as a band and whatever. But so that's why I say that I have top 25 albums that would not necessarily be top 25 bands.
Well, like my top rock and roll song of all time is Kashmir.
Kashmir, yeah.
Yeah. And yes, Led Zeppelin is up there on my top bands, but they're not my number one.
Interesting. Well, we all know that
So
Blondie's your number one, so that's easiest enough, Jason. Hey, I'm not gonna lie though. If I was a 21-year-old or 20-year-old in 1979, I probably would have had a small crush on that lead singer. She was a pretty lady back then.
Deborah Harry.
Yeah,
Deborah Harry. Yep.
a lovely lady. Anyway, all right, Jason. Well, let's close it out. Any final thoughts on INXS? And by final thoughts,
No,
I don't mean a
just
20-minute dialogue. No, I'm kidding.
oh, sorry. You know me, man of many words. No, I'd just say go out there, go get some INXS on vinyl, people. Listen to it the way it was originally intended. The warmth of vinyl, that music just pops with vinyl. I would say do that. I would say go out and buy Kick. You know, that's a good one to buy.
Guns in the Sky. Oh, such good.
But make sure you listen to the extended version. Apparently,
Good
there's
song.
twice as much song. But no, go and listen to that. Listen to Shabu Shaba. See what you think. You know that's a good album. And then give Michael Hutchence some credit and listen to his last hit song off of Elegantly Wasted, the title track. You know, good song. Just a great fun mid late 90-ish song. Yeah, I would say just go out and turn it up. That's what we say.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening, and Jason, we'll see you next time.
All right.
Later.
Later.